Is having an associate more hope than heartbreak, or the other way around? Hi there, I'm Greg Venning. Welcome to the Questing Chiropractor, the podcast that helps you to build a practice around your vision, to structure it so you can have ease, so you can change the world one person at a time and enjoy the profits that come from it. And today we're going into a deep dive on associates. Now, for a lot of chiropractors, bringing an associate on board feels like the logical next step. More leverage, more impact, maybe more freedom, but too often it turns into confusion, unmet expectations, legal gray areas, and a relational strain that nobody saw coming. In this episode, we're unpacking what actually makes associate practices work, what makes them fail. We'll break down why principals want associates, where the common breakdowns happen, and the difference between renter, employee, and contractor models. Importantly, we're going to cover the 4 archetypal models and structures that shape how these relationships fail or succeed based on the structure of your practice. As always, as you're listening, if you're finding that this might be useful for a friend or a colleague, please send this on to them on whatever platform you're listening or watching, and consider giving us up to a 5-star review. Click subscribe so that you can hear more from us. Listen on. Welcome to the Questing Chiropractor podcast. We help you grow as visionary, vital, and capable chiropractors who are always on. We do things differently as we help to elegantly awaken your innate wisdom within. We help you create robust, predictable, and trustworthy practices that serve oceans of people and yet still have free time for yourselves and your families. We use neuroscience to deliver better business results so that you can get greater, deeper, and more effective impact in more ways. We are Questing Chiropractors, and this is our story.
Hi, Greg. Great to be with you again.
Nimrod, I love being on the Questing Chiropractor with you. Hello.
Hello. And really lovely to see that this is gaining some legs and having some impact around different circles. I'm hearing people come up and be grateful for some of the stupidity and the insights and whatever else that we share.
I've had a couple of messages recently about people getting deep insight from the podcast, so it's amazing to hear that coming back. So if you are listening and you want to reach out to us, please let us know what you're enjoying and what you'd like to know more of.
Yeah, absolutely. This is mostly an unstructured flow of thoughts and insights with some good preparation, but always happy to hear what people would like us to dive into. Speaking of diving into, so we are looking at the wonderful and messy world of growing your practice with associates.
Yeah, wonderful and messy. It can be both at the same time, or it can be headache, messy, heartbreaking if a couple of factors aren't taken into play. And it'd be great to see how we can help chiropractors to get more into the wonderful part and less into the messy part.
Yeah, or lean into the messy to make it wonderful.
The messy or the wonderful, yeah.
The wonder of mess. So I know that this is a huge topic, and it's a brilliant coaching topic that we can work with our questers, our coachees for weeks or months or years to continue to refine. But the 3 points that we're going to cover today are just touching on some different reasons why chiropractors may consider having an associate, and then also looking at what are some of those ingredients that make for a happy team and relationship with associates there. And that's for everyone, the principal, the associate, the CAs, and the people coming into the practice. And then the third point, what are some of the structural things to look out for, both as downfalls and as considerations for making success with an associate coming into the team. So let's dive into it. Why is this important for us to look at? What's the relevance? What's the emotional pain for chiropractors on this topic, Greg?
I think it starts with hope, and I think it starts with optimism, and I think it starts with possibility of going beyond one person, one practice, to this idea of leverage and the idea of there's so many more people to help, and there's so much more that we can do if there's more than one chiropractor in a business or a location, or maybe multiple locations with different chiropractors. So I think that's where it starts. And I think what we see on the back end when things haven't been considered maybe as well as they could have is heartbreak. And I think the heartbreak is mainly driven by the the lack of realization of this optimism, or failing to see this dream come true. And I think there's some key things we can cover here that'll help chiropractors to have a better chance of getting to fulfill this hope, getting to fulfill this lovely vision that they have in their hearts and their minds.
Yeah, nice, nice. Yeah, and I love that you said that there's heartbreak there. And who is feeling that heartbreak?
So, like, we get to see this from so many different fronts as coaches, especially coaches where we deal a lot with the associate practice structures that people have. And it's the heartbreak from, I want to take on an associate, but I can't find one. How do I find an associate? To the person who's going, oh, I hate it when these associates leave me. Um, and loads of things in between about frustrations in the relationship and
Yeah.
realizing that whether you're listening to this as a principal, maybe considering associates, or you're somebody who's an associate in a practice, this is going to be equally powerful for you to run through some of the structures we're going to talk about today, so that you're clear on your reasons and your structures and your relationships within this, because it can be so beneficial. It can be so mutually beneficial if you love running the business side of things and you want to be a principal. That's amazing. And if you also don't want to do the business stuff, you want to be a chiropractor, be able to go into a practice and leave and not have to worry about the ownership stuff and be a professional associate, there's a huge space to play. And I think
Yeah.
that's an underappreciated space in the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's so many layers to this that we would get into on coaching over months or years. It's hard to keep this at a surface level. And I think that heartbreak happens not only for the principal chiropractor on those fronts, and for the associate, because they both walked in with certain expectations of how this is going to go, but also for the team and for the practice people. There's heartbreak on all fronts when this doesn't work. I know one of the associates that left me recently, because we also have associates that don't work out. My CA coming towards the end of that relationship was like, I knew this was going to happen and I knew this person wouldn't work out, and I could see it from the, get go, you know. And so she was expressing her heartbreak, at which point I expressed my heartbreak of, why didn't you fucking tell me? You know?
Well,
So,
but
it's there's
we
multi
all need to
layers.
learn from these experiences,
Yeah.
and through the ones that haven't worked out for us as well. Like, we learn the science, and then we empower and sometimes really strongly nudge
Yeah.
the people in our team to speak up. Your voice matters.
Yes.
What
Yes.
were you seeing that I wasn't seeing? And we
Yeah.
learn from these processes. So we are not on this as modicums of perfection. We are imperfect wayshowers. We have lots of insight, lots of experience, and coaching tools to help you to find out yours. But you said the word there is expectation. And I think that's why we want to start with, like, what's the reason? Because the reason that you're going into either becoming an associate, or wanting to take on an associate, is what will then drive your expectations. And the next step would be making sure those expectations are declared, but you can't really know what they are until you're quite clear on your reason for entering into this kind of relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought it up in terms of your vision or your hope, what it is you're looking to leverage. And I think maybe that's a good entry way to explore those expectations. What would be the different things that principal chiropractors want to leverage when they're considering bringing on an associate?
Yeah, and it's be quite clear that the word leverage doesn't always mean the way it's sometimes looked at, which is the owner leveraging off the backbreaking work somebody else does. There's leverage both ways in these relationships. So for the practice owner, what you're leveraging is that you have a facility, you have space, you have a trained team, you have this resource that you probably can't fill to capacity. And if you had another person with you, or if you're looking to open another site and have somebody in there, again, you have a resource that isn't being fully utilized. So the leverage you gain is by having another person come in and have more hours, more time, more energy. They can then leverage on that facility from the structures you've created, the systems you've put into place, and you learn how to improve your structures and your facilities and your team based on them being there. So there's quite a few points of leverage you gain from the situation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, the point is be clear about what you are wanting to leverage. If you're looking for more time or money as a result of this, that can be a trap.
Yes, this is one of the things we talk a lot about or post a lot about is if your primary purpose for wanting an associate is more time off and more money, we caution that those can be byproducts, and you have a high probability that you can get those as byproducts of doing this. But if that's your primary purpose for doing it, that's a tricky road that leads to a lot of heartbreak. It's very transactional, and your team and your associates will feel that, and generally the principal feels unfulfilled in that.
Yeah, and also I think that it's often a victim of short-term vision. So you think you're going to get more money in the short term, but in the short term, you've got to invest more money. And same with time. You think that you're going to be able to take some shifts off and your associate's going to cover it. But actually, those shifts you take off become shifts that you invest in the associate and the team as well, and the people and the mistakes and the learnings.
Yeah, what we don't realize from the business owner point of view is whenever you add a new person into a business, your complexity goes up by a factor of more than just that one person adding in,
Right.
purely by the dynamics of another moving part that adds in actually 10 more moving parts. And yeah, so being really aware of that complexity that comes down the road. So we've got to be aware that our reasons, if they're strong enough and clear enough to accept that on the path to maybe getting more time and money, in the longer term picture, great, but no, and be very frank with yourself on this, is as an associate coming in, whether it's a new grad or somebody experienced, there's going to be a part where they're going to be costing you time and money.
Yep.
Now, this doesn't mean if you're an associate listening to this doesn't mean you're bad or wrong. This is just part of the game. This is the nature of doing. And as the associate coming in, when you're looking to get grounded, it's costing you time and money to get into the space
Yep.
as well. It doesn't mean that there aren't ways that can be handled with great onboarding and all the other moving pieces that can be done right. But the first thing is, let's be clear on the reasons for both parties coming together into this relationship, because it is a relationship. It's not a transaction.
That's right.
Transactions happen within the relationship, but it's a relationship first and foremost.
Yeah, and I think, this will speak to something we may touch on at the very end, which is if you were running a McDonald's franchise that looks like every other McDonald's franchise, and all you needed is someone new on the fryer, that's quite transactional. That's something where you can plug them into the training and it doesn't matter who's frying those fries, it'll get done, right? But that's not what happens, especially with a new chiropractor coming into the relationship in a boutique, mostly one-off practice. This is heavily relational. It's very different game that's going on there, And if you think that if maybe you've been a principal chiropractor with working with just one CA or maybe two CAs, a tech CA or a second CA switching in, and suddenly you bring someone else into the relationship, it's opening up the dynamics in such more complex ways, especially when you're looking at it's in chiropractor, it's not a CA, and maybe also they're a newer grad, so they, haven't got rungs on the board in terms of all of those masteries and skills that we need to be wonderfully human in practice.
Again, it's the relational space before the transactional space, and embracing the messiness and complexity that always brings in. You're bringing another member, another person into your family, and that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, that's touched a little bit on the different, we use the word leverage that we may be looking for as a principal chiropractor. We didn't really touch on what the associate's expectations may be, because that's opening up a whole other conversation. Maybe we should have another time.
Yep.
But the point is, be clear about what your hopes, your dreams, your points of leverage, your desires are there. Don't make it about short-term gains in time or money, and really dig into what that means for you and for the team, and then communicate them transparently and honestly and clearly, and get really good agreement on that. Would that cover that?
Yeah. And let's also say, and it shouldn't bear mention saying, but let's do this because the reality is it probably does need to be said is when you're doing this and you're going into your reason and you're starting to construct some kind of offer for associates, over promising and under delivering is not doing anyone any favors. Be aware of your capacity and your constraints and realize that under promising and over delivering is a much better place to be. We look around and we see adverts in different classifieds and spaces of huge amounts being promised in all these stories. And what we hear back both from associates and the principals then is the heartbreak of under delivery of promises as you go through. So getting really clear on your reason will help you to be much more integritous and have much more integrity around the offer than you create for these associates coming on board with you.
Yeah, I guess jumping on that, the one thing I often have a lot of potential associates coming to me and asking me, what do you think of this agreement or contract or offer? And my alarm bells go off when there is an overpromising. When the principal is going, yeah, you'll get this and this and this, and you'll see this many people from day one, and it'll be easy. And I warn them right off that you need to have open conversations about that, because in our experience, that's just setting up for failure and that heartbreak that you mentioned. What I do think is useful here is to make sure that you go back to your practices, values, vision, statement of purpose, mission, whatever you want to call it, and find where the alignment is there to bring in a new associate.
Common purpose that'll bring more than one clinician, because remember you're taking on another clinician who has their own license, their own clinical skills, their own way of looking at things. What is the common purpose that is bigger than you, that'll encapsulate and be big enough for somebody else to fit within that umbrella and be able to express their uniqueness within a set of structures that you guys do the same or together? And it's that deep and abiding purpose. And if you're really looking to run an associate practice, being able to embrace the challenges and the support that come along the way of people coming in and not fitting where you thought they would, and expectations not being matched, and getting better at doing that. We want to have a deep reason that really inspires us, so that messiness along the way is stuff we learn from and get better with along the way, and we realize that, and that allows us to get into that the realization of that hope that we felt in the beginning. And so if that reason is nice and deep, and it does evolve over time, then you just embrace that messiness, like you said, Nimrod. So an associate came in and they left, didn't quite work out. We learn from it, and cool, we can do better next time. Let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of moving on, I think the takeaway on this first part is, don't make it transactional, make it transformational, make it relational, and relate it back to your vision, your values, and clarify the expectations so that it invites your mission to be leveraged in a greater way out into your community and into the world.
Yeah, so this is what we would do coaching with, to coach someone to create this as an associate centered mission in their practice. If you're listening to this, simply start by writing down, I would love to have an associate practice because. And then finish that statement with something heartfelt and inspiring that will help you to move through the messy to get to the beautiful transformation. And if you've got that really clear, that can be an amazing start on this process.
Yeah. My one little tip there would be, link it to your mission. So, how does that help us fulfill what we're here to do? So,
exactly.
Now we're starting to touch structure. So, moving beyond those reasons, those points of leverage, those hopes, those dreams, and looking at what is the structure of, I guess, a successful associate coming in to the practice. What would be some of the touch points that we should look at there? What are the key highlights here, Greg?
Find that it's really useful to get clear on what you mean by an associate in your practice. And lots of chiropractors have never been trained in this. They don't have any formal kind of business coaching or training in the space, and they don't know the options that are open to them. So you could do something as like the more distant version of it is somebody comes in and rents space and maybe pays for some of what happens at the front desk as a shared expense. You're not really responsible for them too much. They're literally renting space and using a resource of your front desk. You can get all the way into becoming a partnership, which is not really an associateship, but you could be kind of working towards that at the other end of things where you're intimately connected. And then in between, from the renter, you can have somebody who comes in as an employee, or you can have somebody who's a contractor, or somebody who eventually kind of becomes partner. And which structure you use is going to be heavily dependent on the reason that you want the associate. If you want a more hands-off approach, where you literally just have some space that you want to make sure is earning some money and more people are being served, then maybe just having somebody come and rent space is probably the best one for you there, where it is very hands-off. You don't have to do huge amounts. Important that you guys stay in touch, and there's still regular meetings, and we're not going to get too deep into that, but it's the more hands-off approach. The employee contractor part is far more hands-on and requires significant resources of time and money to really get that relationship to flourish.
Yeah, I'm just working with one of our questers who's looking at bringing on an associate, and had this very question of, if they come in and they just basically rent the space, then what is that relationship going to look like? And, I asked him some questions about, well, what would you feel would be the business's responsibility around reputation and service? And then what would be the provision of some of the utilities like the CA or the phone or the marketing, and because that will very much determine whether this is a good fit for a rental, a business in business sort of idea, or whether it should be moving, into a more ascended version, which would be an employee or a contractor, depending on the relationship that you want to set up there. So I think the renter thing for me is kind of like, from the associate's point of view, they're renting a space as if they were renting a space in a gym or a yoga studio or a medical practice or a physio, or I know a chiropractor that works out of a hospital as a rented space. It just happens to be a chiropractic practice, and it has the advantage of having chiropractic on the sign outside, right? But it's not really very different in any other way.
No, and you would run completely separate appointment books, completely separate actual practices within the building, and that's a great way to look at it. They'll be running a completely separate practice. There's very little integration between you two, apart from some collegial interprofessional collaboration on one or two things. But other than that, it's separate practices. You just happen to be sharing floor space.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, to move it up to the employee or contractor bit, there's a much deeper level of care from the principal about the success of the associate, and also a much deeper compassion and connection with the overall business's mission. So you and the principal and the associate are aligned in the direction of where this practice is going.
Yeah, you see, you're far more values matching. You have conversations around it. You try and evolve the practices, values and vision and purpose together. You have some shared DNA in that space. So there is a much deeper level relationship in there. And like you said, the principal is far more concerned and has far more care around how well the associates are doing, all within the practice purpose. So the associate's care and attention is not, you're not seeing enough, you're not making enough. It's, are the numbers and the performance reflective of our ideal purpose and our stated values? And of your values as the associate, are you growing in the way you want to? What kind of, is this environment suiting you? When you start getting to the contractor base, the principal who runs the facility actually works for the contractor.
Yeah, you jumped ahead there, Greg, and you threw in some terms that was going to confuse a hell of a lot of people.
Okay, great. Let's backtrack then. Let's backtrack some of those.
So, maybe having a look at just that employee level and, and moving into what you will be introducing as a contractor, we're in the procedures, we're in the systems, we're in the structures here. So what would be some of the high level structures and systems and procedures and tactics that really should be considered to make this relationship sing, this employee and, moving into the contractor as well, because in some ways they're not too different.
Yeah, yeah. In some ways, they're quite close. So again, it's clarification of expectations from both parties is the I would say the biggest thing. Both parties clear enough on what they want for as a purpose of the engagement, um, and then getting clear on expectations. So the practice will provide X, Y, and Z on this basis, on this thing. Our expectations of reputational management, of technique usage, of there's a list of things that we go through in terms of expectations, and then for the associate or employee coming in, is there clear expectations? What's the practice going to do for marketing? What do you have to do for marketing? What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? In the employee basis, the principal can dictate far more of what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, obviously within them keeping their own professional license and identity and being their own clinician. In the contractor basis, there's a lot less that the principal can dictate to the contractor, to the associate coming in. And be aware, in whatever jurisdiction you're in, there's often certain tests within law to say whether this is an employee or pseudo-employee relationship or a contractor relationship. Please make sure you look at your local jurisdiction's laws, get an employment lawyer in there, chat to us. We have some experience and we can put you onto some people who can help with that in different spaces around the world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very geographical the way that contractor works, and maybe we'll chat about it in just a moment to expand on some of those big terms that you used before. But I think to look at it from another point of view, a contractor would be like if you needed a plumbing job done at home and you contracted a plumber. You set up an agreement on the expectations out front, but you can't tell them what they must do in your house or in their business. And it's a similar sort of thing when you're contracting a chiropractor to work as an associate. There's an agreement that kicks off the entire thing, but along the way, you actually can't enforce it by putting demands on them. It's a continuous growing agreement that opens up over time.
Yeah, and that's a place where lots of chiropractors have run into trouble is they want to run this contractor agreement. In Quest, we have a specific one called a facilities agreement, which is a great contract to use. And then they make the mistake of treating the associate like an employee after engaging as a contractor. And that's a mistake that gets made, unfortunately, a lot. And what happens then is the contractor, the person who's supposed to be a contractor, turns around later on and says, actually, I was treated like an employee. And now the principal has to pay for sick pay and leave and whatever
Social
in
security.
your jurisdiction, social security type things. And suddenly you're in for this big bill that you didn't realize you were in for. So you can't have the cake and eat it too in this situation. Is if they're a contractor and you want that kind of practice, be very clear about what you can and can't tell them to do. And if you want an employee, then you can be clear about what you can and tell them to do. Now, that doesn't mean that they have free reign as a contractor, because you have a high level agreement of the purpose and the values that the practice is defined by. And if a person starts moving out of that, then they're moving beyond the level of the agreement. So there's the agreement and then there's the contract. And the contract is actually the lesser of the two. It's important and it's necessary. But the actual clear agreement around these expectations and the purpose is the high level part of that. That is so often missed.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, this is unfolding over time. It's enacted over time. So it's reviewed. How well are both sides meeting this relationship? And like any relationship, when it no longer functions, the choice is either to, bring it back into function and ease or to part ways. So I think, when you mentioned, that one of the important parts of the structure of an employee or contractor agreement is clarifying expectations. What's really been useful for me here is mapping those expectations across the innate model quadrants. We won't teach the quadrants here, but basically, what are your expectations around their concepts, ideas, and philosophies? What are your expectations around their procedures and understanding and science? What are your expectations around their skills and competencies and their application of knowledge and mastery and connection? And then what are your expectations around their ability to take the mission out there into the world and communicate and expand on the impacts that they're having? And that obviously goes in both directions. So, it's nice to map it out because it makes it more complete, and making sure that we'll never get all the expectations well defined and well clarified, but it just gives us another level of security in doing that. What's your finding with that, Greg?
I think breaking it up into something like the innate model and chunking it is really useful so that we get clear on what are the different levels that we need to consider with these expectations. And like you said, any relationship, we say in Quest a lot, is all relationships are based on agreement, and that those agreements are ever evolving. Just because a couple got married 50 years ago and said I do based on those agreements doesn't mean that's the same marriage as it was every 5-10 years after that. It's consistently evolving, and long-term relationships that do last have an evolving and often an explicit involving shift in these agreements based on these expectations. And there's a saying that gets thrown around in some of our quester calls by one of our questers. He says this, and it just lands true every time, is undeclared expectations are premeditated resentments and frustrations. Yeah. And so turning these into explicit expectations and agreements is just such a powerful thing to do. And like you say, I think sometimes we think that just because an associate's in our practice and their numbers are okay and they're happy, I want to let sleeping dogs lie, and I don't want to have a tricky conversation. I don't want to kick up a hornet's nest. But actually not sitting down and going, great, how are we doing? Where are we? How are we meeting these ones for you? How are you meeting them for us? Let's do some kind of review. It's like the expecting somebody to be on maintenance care for the rest of their life, wellness care, optimization care once every 2 weeks, and never doing a review ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not realistic. It doesn't work. We know those people will eventually drift out, and you get surprised by it, and you get some whiplash from it.
And cue the heartbreak.
There we go. That's where it comes in again.
So before we jump into that, which is the next quadrant, I do want to help just clarify some of those terms. So, you mentioned contractor versus employee. It's very jurisdictional. So please look geographically what is allowed and reach out if you need some help with that. But just give a thumbnail sketch of what a contractor versus employee would look like.
But the real essence of it is, if you're the principal, the employee works for you. You get to dictate a lot of their terms of service for you. When it's a contractor, you work for them. You run a facility in which they operate as an independent contractor in your practice. And again, please make sure your legalities are great, are right according to your jurisdiction. I would say that would be the thumbnail view of a great way to think of it. And it really does help you to realize which one you want to be in and which one you want in your practice. Because a lot of times people go for the contractor part because then they don't have to have all the stuff that goes with employment of tax and leave and statutory pay and all these things. So they want the contractor part of it, but then they treat the people like employees, and then you've crossed the line there. So employee works for you. You get to dictate terms of service. Contractor, you work for them, and you have an agreement on terms of service that the facility provides for them and what service they'll provide within the facility.
Yeah. And just, to highlight, sometimes just because you're not paying all of those employee costs, your percentage of pay to the contractor will be higher. So it's not necessarily that you're, in inverted commas, saving money. It's just quite a different way of setting up the relationship. Yeah. So as we're finishing this section, which is looking at the structure of the agreement between the principal and the associate, whether it's as a renter, as an employee, as a contractor, we're not going to touch partner. I think that's quite a different level. What would be one caution and one takeaway?
I would say the caution, and it's going to sound a bit like a broken record, but the caution is be really clear on your reasons and your motives and be very explicit about your expectations. That would still be my biggest caution. Make those explicit to yourself and to them. And the biggest takeaway is by doing this well, by doing it in a sense of relationship and always looking for mutual benefit from it, you can have incredibly enriching, rewarding human relationships and profitable relationships that will buck the trend of the heartbreak that gets caused a lot in these spaces. So the possibility of a great relationship is there where there's mutual beneficial arrangements.
Beautiful, beautiful. So that brings us into the relating of relationships and the different ways that that can express itself in a practice. Now, chiropractors, buckle up. This is all about you and what you've set up. So if this, pours salt into some wounds, it's your wound. I don't know how else to say it. So the structures could be, I want someone to work for me and do exactly what I say. But we want a big open relationship where everything is fair and everyone has a say. And those things don't go together. You may be wanting to run a very green, equal, open, democratic practice, but in practice, if we were going to video it and look at it, there's a chief and there's a tribe. So what are the different ways chiropractors may be relating with their teams and with their associates as well?
Yes, so there's essentially kind of four archetypical structures that we find happen within practices. We'll touch on each here. Quest has much deeper training on these, so this will be a high level view of these with some pros and some cons of each. But there is a much deeper training called the associate driven practice system that goes into this in depth. So the first one, you mentioned the word tribal there, is where you have the main chiropractor, the principal, who is like the tribal chief. And this doesn't have to be bad or wrong. The tribal chief brings a sense of identity. They bring a whole big purpose to it. They bring values, but it's their values and their identity. It's not really a shared value system or a shared identity system. So essentially, they can bring in a lot of energy. They can often be very charismatic, but it is very much their way or the highway. The benefit of it is it brings identity into a practice, which is important. The drawback is it only goes as far as the associate. And if you're happy to have junior people come in and learn at your feet for a while, it's generally shorter lived times in this practice. And you're happy for them to come in for a couple of years and then come out, and you don't have to give way in any shape or form. You can still be the center of the identity driven practice. Then that's a great place to be, as long as you're all aware that that's what you're entering into.
Yeah, I just expand on one thing. I think not only does it bring identity, it brings strong rituals and traditions and very clear ways of knowing how things go and where the hierarchy is as well. So that can really feed into our sense of grounded security and safety because we know the structure and we know the hierarchy and we know the traditions and the rituals of how things are.
Yep. Now, that then gets added to at the next level if the next level is built on the first level. So the next level is the corporate style practice, which is built on structure and hierarchy and lots of procedures and lots of things nailed where we all know where we stand and what our roles and responsibilities are. If it hasn't got the identity and culture of the tribal practice infused in it, it can be quite soulless. And we think of a big corporate structure, big corporate companies everywhere. They just have values plastered on the wall that nobody ever listens to and is just given lip service. They're there. They'll provide safety. You're a cog in a wheel when they're soulless like that. And for some people, that's okay. But if you can have some sense of the tribal identity and culture infused into this corporate model, now you've brought it to life some more. And that's necessary if we want to grow past a certain point. We need a corporatization. It doesn't mean you have to be a big corporate, but you need structures, roles, responsibilities, job descriptions. You need office policy manuals, you need procedures all identified in that office policy manual so that everybody knows what's going on and they don't always have to turn to the tribal chief to figure out what's going on because they're not the center of operations anymore. Now the center of operations are the systems that run the place.
Yeah.
So that's more the corporate model.
Yeah, and this model is so important. And as chiropractors, we may retract from it because we don't work in a corporate setting, and we look at corporate settings as being this horrid beast. And through that, the structures, the systems, the procedures of the corporatization, we get huge achievement and huge production. And freeing up, as you said. One of the questers that I spoke to this week has really wanted to expand the reach of their practice. They've been in practice by themselves with the two CAs for a while. And the ceiling they keep hitting against is that they haven't done the work of proceduralizing things and putting it into written office policy manual or procedure manual. And so there's no point of leverage, going back to that word, for them to pass this on. Because it can't be repeated in a way where everyone can see in black and white how to do things. And that's going to be our step of working on that so that they can successfully bring in an associate and grow in the direction of their mission. So it's a really important step, the corporate step.
Like you say, often we try and avoid the structuring of it that way, but like we talk about in Quest so much is the identity is the thing that makes our hearts sing and brings so much energy to the place, and the order unlocks the ease to allow that to flow into the service of what we want to do. Beautiful. And we often resist the order, we often resist the structure that creates the ease, that allows the flow.
Yeah.
So if we lean into that part, we actually unlock massive amounts of flow. Like you say, like you can unlock massive amounts of production. And by production, that doesn't mean production of widgets and just banging away on people on a table. The production we do is changing the world one person at a time through brain, spine, and nervous system with the beautiful science, art, philosophy, and stewardship of chiropractic. That is our production.
Yeah. Yeah. So tribal, corporate.
Next is what we call the wayshower style practice, where now you've got what Nimrod, you were talking about earlier, more the kind of the green democratic space where people can come together, shared decision making, shared values, and everyone has a say. And where this is done well is you've got the best from that tribal model. You've got a sense of identity and the rituals that come with it. Then you've got the corporatized space with the very detailed structure, proceduralized things, so everybody knows what needs to happen at what time. And now you can bring it into the space where we sit around in a circle and we can discuss things, and we sit around as equals. And this includes your CAs and your tech CAs, by the way, as well. Where this is done well, that can work beautifully. Where it's not done well is when it's divorced of the identity, or it doesn't have enough structure to uphold it. And then what happens is everything gets talked around in a circle forever and nothing ever gets done, or it moves way too slowly and people get bored.
Yeah. Ever been in a practice where they have endless weekly meetings, but nothing progresses forwards?
Yes. That's the downfall, where we haven't embraced the proceduralization and we haven't done the corporate stuff well enough. And they seem like complete opposites. The wayshower sitting in a circle, everybody being heard, sounds like the opposite of this corporatized, structural, detailed process. But they need each other to be able to function really well. The complement of them together is so beautiful. But as chiropractors, like you say, we tend to reject the structure if we want the people together in a circle, or we hold on to the structure if we don't want to hear everybody's voice and we just want to have it the corporate CEO style says what goes.
Yeah. And I want to point out a really important pattern. There is another model above this, and it's a hugely expansive model where we really manifest our mission in the world and create huge legacy. And legacy is created at each level. But the point I want to highlight is that as we move through these from tribal to corporate to wayshower and then up to the manifesting one, there is always an element of taking the best of the previous and building on that to expand, to include, to move up, and to ascend. And this is really, really key. When we don't do that, we cause disassociation, we cause distancing, we cause noise in the machine, and that's the subluxation often. Or we keep devolving down to a previous level, even though, in my introduction to this section, we talk about playing a big game, but we actually in reality are down at a different level. And none of those levels are unhealthy. It's just when there is all that noise that is getting in the way of expansive growth, that's really what's unhealthy. So I know we have this fourth level, and maybe just touch on it really briefly, because I think it's really important for most chiropractors to focus on those first three levels. So just as an introduction of what could be possible into the future, what does that manifesting fourth version of relationship look like?
So the fourth one is lovely and expensive, and you're right, it needs a whole unpacking on its own. But the essence of it is this idea of embracing competition and cooperation, and seeing them not as opposites, but actually just as complementary to each other. So we call it co-opetition, or the comparation model, where you're competing and cooperating together. The essence of it is almost, instead of going from a hierarchy or a democracy, going to a holarchy, where each section has its own roles and responsibilities, and they interact with each other, and they're both competing and cooperating with each other. Now, if you can imagine that working well, you have to have a clear sense of identity for that to work well. You have to have clear structures and policies and procedures that are agreed to for that level. You have to have all voices being heard for that level to work, and then you can go on and then take the best of each of those and move into that fourth level.
Yeah. And really quick note, when you say all voices being heard, some of those voices aren't always right. And part of being up on this level is going, yeah, we can hear those voices, and we're going to take the partial truths from each of them, rather than saying that all of them are always right.
Yeah, spot on. It's not singing Kumbaya with linked hands sitting around in a circle, right? It's, we value you. Thank you for your input. We're going to go this way, not that way. And what you said was valuable, so we'll do it with this nuance in it, so that you're not disregarding what they said, but you realize that you're here for a purpose, and that you're here to get things done and move ahead with that purpose. And that means that we need to be making useful decisions. And it's really a meritocracy in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, meritocracy, where some people are more right than others. So
and it's not based on seniority. It's not based on the pyramid. It's based on what is most useful at the time, and what's best for the enterprise. Because now you're thinking of the practice as an enterprise. What is best for the enterprise to fulfill its purpose?
Yeah.
And you're making decisions on that level.
Yeah. Let's not go down rabbit holes of this fourth version.
That's the furthest we'll go for that one for now.
So just looking back at the expanse from tribal to corporation to wayshower, and then up onto this manifesting fourth version, what would be one key takeaway, both for principals and for associates? Because I think the relationship bears fruit in both directions.
Yeah, I think that none of those is better than the other inherently. It's what is best for you as a principal, that what is best structure for you to set up based on what you want, what makes your heart sing, what order is going to unlock the flow and the ease for you. So while tribal seems to be the first one and things build on it, that doesn't make tribal bad. So there are loads of chiropractors who do great work and run really busy practices and have associates within a tribal space. It has drawbacks and it has benefits. So I think the first thing is that, neither one of these is inherently better than the other, and being explicit about which one you're aiming at for now is useful, and then seeing if there is an evolution over time. And we've seen people go from really big kind of corporatized practices, and after a while go, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to run the kind of tribal space for myself, or people going the other way. So the best one for you for now is the best one.
Yeah, beautiful. And the one caution I would add is, and again, it comes back to your original point of you need to clarify expectations. We all need to clarify expectations. If you have not clarified from the principal's point of view what the structure of this relationship is. And if the associate has not clarified what structure they would love to play in, when there's a mismatch, it's destructive and the relationship ends in heartbreak. Right. And so I think that's where the clarification is so key. Bring it out on top of the table, and that's how this relationship works, by defining what are the elements of this relationship.
Absolutely. It's how it's done in practice, not just what somebody says over a Zoom interview call once off, that then we decide we're gonna get married together, we're gonna get into this relationship together. It's
I know.
if either way, please make sure you get an associate into your practice to come and see and observe and get a feel for it. And if you're an associate, try and go and please go and meet and sit in the practice and see how things interact, so that you can get an idea of not what it's like on paper or on a Zoom call, but what it's like in reality. How does it operate? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? Then you're going to get a much more real and authentic and honest sense of what's actually happening in the space.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's beautiful ways to test that relationship before you enter into it. Coming back to those clarified expectations, it's the same thing as dating enough before you get married. It's important to do that, and we definitely can help, not with the dating bit, but with the associate relationship bit. It's really important. I've seen so many associates write to potential principal chiropractors promising the world, but they can't back it up, and similarly in the other direction as well from the principals. So important. So now we're talking about when the relationship goes well, how it can really bring about scale. And so I'm going to throw you a curveball, Greg, because you threw it in there. Let's talk about how scale could happen by having the practice, the business, actually not expand out in its size, but actually coming in with more quality. What would scale look like in that way, by bringing in associates and doubling down in quality?
Great framing, actually, because so often we hear the word scale and we hear it from the Silicon Valley tech bro way of thinking about scaling is you have to take over the world, and if you're not doing that, you're not doing anything. And we see some chiros moving in that space, and not to say that big multi-practice systems can't work. They can. There's a specific niche for them, and there's a specific set of things that needs to happen for that. But scale qualitatively rather than quantitatively is underappreciated within the profession. And so bringing associates into the practice to help make the practice better while the associate improves and gets better as well is massively underappreciated. And that's the actual relational rather than transactional response that happens here. Nimrod, I'm assuming, tell me if I'm right or wrong, that associate who joined you and has moved out, there's things you've learned from that process, from having that associate in the practice, that makes you better than you were before.
Absolutely. For one, fucking tell me the truth, you CA. Of course, there's so much that we've learned. Absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, did I lean into the CA enough? Did I pick up that they were having some reservations, and did I not act on those? Or did I not pick it up at all? And how am I going to pick it up the next time? Because there's going to be a next time. So the scale is often qualitative. What makes our practice better for having had this person with us? And if you have gone through a recent heartbreak in a breakup in a relationship with an associate, come back and look at, what have I learned from this? How we got better from it? Can I do some gratitude for what they've brought in, even if there's been messiness, even if it involved lawsuits and lawyers, and if it got to that, still there's going to be some gratitude you can find from that. You are more specific about certain points of law than you ever were before. You're more aware of relationship breakdown, or where it probably started breaking down long before there were complaints. So that version of scaling is really, really, really important, and is massively underappreciated in chiropractic practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so when the relationships do go well, and maybe give us a thumbnail of what a successful relationship would look like in terms of scaling at the tribal, the corporate, and the wayshower level. What would scaling look like when that relationship buzzes?
But the tribal level is that the identity that's been created around the the principle is upheld and magnified and really shines through bright, and the community knows about it. And yeah, they might drive it as this personality force, and the other personalities will be underneath them, kind of sitting at his feet, but learning from that space and then moving out as soon as their own identity starts to grow. That would actually be a humming space, because if their identity grows within there, then they end up, their identity would compete with the tribal identity, and that leads to friction. So you'd have people moving in and moving out before there was friction on an identity level. In the corporate one, it's coming in, finding your place within the policies and the procedures, and improving on them and tweaking on them, and the whole practice then creating more order, more structure, and unlocking more ease in there. When that doesn't hum is where you come in and you're not contributing to, or you're not leaning into those processes, and then it's like a cog that doesn't fit within a watch, and the whole thing would then spring out and potentially break. So when it's humming, everything would feel smooth, the order would flow, it would feel like a well lubricated system in there. When the cog wants to outgrow its role, if there's a space above it, it can pop up. If there isn't a space above it, then the most appropriate thing is for that cog to move out and go and find another place to be. So that would be the corporate one. In the wayshower model, is people all feeling valued, is very kind of safe in the gut and heart, fulfilling. We have loads of good news stories that we share. We're deeply connected to chiropractic values, and we feel like we're living them. We'd be seeing highish numbers. We might not be smashing it out the park, but it would be, you'd be serving quite a few people coming through the practice. There might be some inefficiencies in that system, but the inefficiencies are the cost of relationships being smooth and very orderly and in tune. And then if you want to get up to the wayshower, it's the manifestor level, that comparation one, that just hums when it produces. And that's it. Like, it's, are we fulfilling the purpose? Are the numbers an artifact of us moving towards that space? If yes, keep going. If no, change something so you move in that direction.
Yeah.
And it would move quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to make a point of clarification, at the corporate level, we're seeing efficiency and often more quantity driving service. And then at the next level up, when we start looking at the wayshower, it's more about effectiveness and doubling down on the quality of what is delivered to each person. And so that may look like one person specializes in seeing kids, another one in seeing professionals, another one in seeing sports. And so there's this division within there that means we can serve in a deeper way, and maybe for less people, but the depth, the connection, the compassion is the driver of the service there. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's scaling it. And, I think chiropractors, principals, and also associates listen to the point Greg made, which is at each level, an associate may leave, but that can actually be a point of scaling as well, because principals, you're scaling your impact on the world by having really developed and evolved this chiropractor who is going out there to continue your mission. And that's your legacy as well. That's a beautiful part of scaling.
Yeah, we don't always realize or pay attention to or appreciate that the associate who's been with us, we've spoke to you about, I used the example of your practice improved having that associate in, but that associate would have grown in your practice as well through what they did like and through what they didn't like. They now go out into the world and they're more efficient and effective, and they're clearer on their purpose than they were before. And so through that experience with you, your leverage on the world is huge, because they will now serve people at a high level because of their interaction with you.
Yep.
And often we focus on the heartbreak of the person leaving us, and that can be real. And the other side of the coin is there's now somebody else who is better off for having been in your practice and will serve people better. And that's part of your legacy and your leverage in there.
Yeah. And scaling out. That's absolutely
Yep.
Zoom
that
out
creates
to
a
see
scale.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Greg, as we're tying this up, we promised we would talk about different reasons for associates coming in, what are the ingredients for happiness, and the different types of relationships that are there as well. So could you sum up these points for us as we're coming to conclude this?
Yes, I think if we come to the topic we were discussing from the very beginning is, do you really want an associate? Don't think that you need to have all of this perfect before you get started. Let's come back to the first one is if we're clear on our reason, and if that's your step is, oh, I need to get clear on my reason. Great, do that and then get started. Don't wait until you have everything perfect before you bring on your first associate. Sometimes you don't know which model you want to be in until you've tried it and realized it does or doesn't work. So I would say that that's probably the most important one is for both associates and principals is get really clear on the reason and get clear on whether, if you're in a relationship, whether that reason is still valid or whether it's shifted or changed. That's one of the reasons why associates come in and leave practices is the reason matches, and then they'll leave when the reason no longer matches either their growth or the practice's growth. The practice can outgrow an associate just as much as an associate can outgrow the practice. And so keep coming back to reviewing the reason why the relationship is there in the first place, and that'll keep guiding you on what the structure needs to be and then what the relationships can evolve into and towards or away from.
Yep. And then in terms of how that happiness plays out, what are some of those key ingredients for making that happen?
I like the idea that we're connected to this bigger purpose, but we're also doing it with a sense of lightness. It's not all seriousness. The seriousness, the impact that chiropractic can have, the bigness of chiropractic is a huge purpose. If we can hold that seriousness lightly and we can engage with each other as individuals, as beings having a physical experience and embrace in a sense of play and wonder and curiosity, I think that's for me is where a lot of the happiness and the fulfillment comes, where we find the hidden gems of magic that are in these relationships. As we're doing some things that are transactional, this is the spark of making things relationally alive. And this helps us when we do hit points of friction. We can do this as humans together, beings having this experience and having different points of view, and then moving through and finding a way to be able to work together or finding a way to end the agreement. But it's done in a sense of, again, lightness is the best way I can explain that and describe that. It's bringing a sense of fun into the seriousness of the purpose that we have and bringing a sense of play into it. We talk in Quest a lot about play with purpose. We have a deep abiding purpose that can be sometimes life and death. And we can engage in it in a sense of play and lightness. And that's always left the space for humanity to be in when we're having tricky conversations around life or death or taxes or money and all the other things that might make us feel a little bit constricted or triggered or emotional. We can sit in that space together and we can solve those challenges if we stay in relation to each other.
Beautiful. The point that I orientate around is, can we do this from our most loving and wise self? The more we do that, the more we can tread with that lightness, even in those messy moments. And, maybe on another podcast, we could look at an analysis of happiness. But when you look at like the psychology and the behavioral sciences and what they say about it, they say that the ingredients are you orientated by purpose and meaning? Do you lean into the difficulty that leads to satisfaction? The effort that is required there, and then do you build enjoyment in the relationships and the memories and the moments and the experiences that you're creating and leading to fulfilling that circle of impact and coming back to meaning. So, that is as true for ourselves as it is for these relationships with our teams, with our associates as well. And I think we did talk quite a bit about the different types of relationships, the different types of structures that there may be. So just what would be some actionable steps, looking at 2 to 3 really high level things that listeners could do to lean into creating better associate relationships?
We'll come back to one we've spoken about a lot, and the reason why we speak it about a lot is it's the reason. Just journaling, sitting down, talking to someone, getting clear on your reasons for wanting to have an associate, and then again clarifying some expectations. Just write down what you expect an associate to do. It might not be the piece of paper you end up showing them, but I think sometimes that we're not clear on what we do expect until we start to see it not get fulfilled. And then start looking at these different structures. Start playing around with the idea of, so if a person was renting, what would that feel like? What would that look like? Don't worry about the money and the percentages and stuff yet. That comes way after that. You can figure that out. But like, do I want somebody hands off in the other room that I never really know what they're doing? Do I want a connection with somebody where we're growing together? Do I want something where I'm directing someone? What is the essence of what you want to feel in the space? It sounds really weird. You're going into a business relationship and you're wondering how I want to feel about it. But you've got to get that right before you get the structure around it right. So I'd say those would be three spaces to get started on. And a fourth space is, if you're having any trouble with this or you want some help with this, is get in touch with us at Quest Chiropractic Coaching. This is what we do a lot of. We get great results with. We've recently got a client who's just sharing some wins with us, where his practice in the UK has grown by £70,000 a year over the last 2 years in a row, and his production has gone from 99% of production down to 50% of production. And his practice has grown beautifully. So that's the kind of thing that can happen when you're being well guided.
Yeah, and he's got an associate, and you're expanding the team.
Yes. Yes, spot on. Yeah.
So just in terms of the Quest resources, we touched on some. The big one is the associate-driven practice, but there's also the innate model, and then the innate model would also help you look at expectations in different ways, and the innate model would also help you with communication and relationships. So there's a lot of resources. If any of those interest you, please get in touch with us if you have any questions, if you're considering bringing on an associate, or if you're an associate considering moving into a relationship, a working relationship, and you want some clarification, also please do reach out to us. Are there any other key resources that you think could be helpful that that Quest has?
So there's the attractive practice model, the book that Mark Apostles has wrote. Mark is the influencer in the world of chiropractic. So the attractive practice model book, which has a huge amount of information of what we've spoken about in here today, and so the huge basic concepts to get right, but it's written really, really beautifully. I'd really encourage you to look for the attractive practice model book by Mark Apostles. It's available online, and you get huge value out of that. That's one resource I'd direct people to quite strongly.
Yeah, and I think the other one I would touch on is, I'm not exactly sure when this podcast is coming out, but I've had a look under the bonnet for the intensive that's going to be done in January, and I think that's quite relevant here, right?
Yeah, so this is going to be January 2026. We're doing a training on the attractive practice model, going through the 4 key parts. If you're listening to this afterwards, you'll probably have heard an ad or a segment about one of the other trainings we're doing coming along. So at any given time, at least once a month, we have a training, and we'll always put an ad on with the podcast. So whatever you've been hearing, whenever you're listening to this, please just jump on with wherever that ad is, and come and join us for a training. If you want to jump in once off and you don't have to become a client, and there's no subscription to that, that's amazing. You can come in, you can learn from us, get something from it, and get some live interaction with us.
Yep, absolutely. And last tiny resource, not so tiny, at some point next year, we're going to open up the coaching to the Bay level. Let's not talk too much about that, but that's where you'll get access to all of the resources for a very affordable rate. So how do you think that could help someone navigate some of this space?
I think that the Bay, like you said, has all the resources. So this is us putting together all of the trainings we've ever done, putting them in one space so you can get what you want when you want it. It's on-demand training, and there's trainings on some of the different business structures, trainings on finance, trainings on how to do a first phone call, and everything in between. So if you have an associate and you think they need help on how to do visit 1, visit 2, it's well guided within that. If you are running a practice and you want some help on these higher level concepts, it's in there for you as well. So it's very much a choose your own adventure. There is a guided path if you want it in there, but there is a literal ocean of resources in the Bay for you to delve into. And we've made it really, really affordable for people to get that level of access.
Beautiful. Well, I think we have I was going to say put the nail in the coffin of the associate principal relationship, but I think none of those words are true. What I wish and hope for everyone is that they do have heartbreak, but maybe a minimal amount, that they notice the noise in the system and allow it to bring about growth and expansion. And that most of all, they find the path that brings about greater delivery of their mission as they impact the community and the world around them with even more love and hope. And we are here for you. So thank you, Greg, for bringing about some amazing wisdom as we navigate this huge topic. I absolutely am here with an open heart for how we can help chiropractors do this even more.
Thanks for guiding the conversation once again, Nimrod. And I too, I was on a call with somebody this morning, and just seeing their transformations come through is something that just makes my heart sing. So if you're in the space where you're looking for your next level of growth, please lean in, let us help you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Greg.
Cheers, Nimrod.